Good evening. Welcome to the Yorktown Central School District Board of Education meeting for March 9, 2020. Can I have a motion with executive session for the matter to discuss tenure?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? All right. Can I have a motion to go back into public session?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Good evening. Welcome to the Yorktown Central School District Board of Education meeting from March 9, 2020. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence for our armed forces and those in our community who have lost loved ones, especially the mother of Laura Brand, the mother of Jennifer Lanzalato, the mother-in-law of Lisa Statler, the mother-in-law of Robert Cias, and the father-in-law of Michelle Tropia. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you for being patient with us. We're going to start with public comment. Anybody wishing to speak on agenda-related items? All right, we can go right into the superintendent's report.
Terrific. Thank you so much. So this evening, we're fortunate to be joined by Dr. Paul Seversky. As you'll recall, the board commissioned Dr. Seversky to conduct a demographic and enrollment study for the district. There are so many housing developments that are in the pipeline. There are enrollment upticks that we're observing, and we just want to make sure that the district is fully prepared to meet whatever enrollment demands may come our way. So at this time, we're fortunate enough to have Dr. Seversky here this evening. He will present to the board his preliminary findings on the demographic study. Dr. Seversky, welcome back to Yorktown. It's wonderful to welcome you back here. I'll ask you to just approach the podium, and you may address the board.
Hi, everybody. How are you? You should have a copy of the document, and I thought what I'd do is just I'll highlight a few major portions that I think are significant for you, and then again, any questions you might have or conversation we should have, please let's do that. If you turn what looks like to be the opening preface, there are the enrollment projections for 5 years out, 8 years out, and 10 years out. As you know, when we do these, we provide what we call a low, mid, and high. And they're based on various assumptions, some more conservative than others, because there's no crystal ball in this. You have to really look at patterns. It's a study of patterns of population and enrollments in your district, as well as some other items like your very high graduation rate, for example, which certainly is excellent and is keeping young people in school until they graduate. But if you look at these three, under the low, mid, and high, you'll see a range and at the first line, you'll see current enrollment. So you can compare and look at the shaded areas. The most conservative, as you can see, are a slight drop. But if you start looking at the mid-range and the high range, the likelihood of you having more enrollment over the next 5, 8, and 10 years is, I'd suggest, relatively high. And we'll explain what that means as we go along. If you turn to page 4, again, it's a study of patterns. Let's take a look at page 4, which is an historical picture of your enrollments, particularly at the one at the bottom, where we dig in a little deeper beyond just K6, 7, 12. That on the bottom of page 4, you'll see a picture that shows K3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 enrollments for the past 6 years. The 9, 12 has decreased. However, looking forward, it suggests it doesn't enter into what the future might look like. Again, those young people are your oldest of the population, and they've moved on. The key is what might happen with the number of clients who will take their place. And that's why, if you look at the remaining 3 trend lines for K3, 6, 8, and 4, 5, 4, 5, and 6, 8 have positive trend lines, but the exciting part for me is that the trend line with the most positive upward movement are your K3s. Those are your clients that'll be with you the longest, right through your intermediate, upper elementary, as well as your middle years and high schools. So that's the pattern of real data, not what if, that's the pattern of your historical enrollment over the past 6 years. If you look at page 7 and 8, the other major factor is, okay, what's happening with our current enrollments? We have any young people leaving us midstream, so to speak, of the 13 years of public education, or coming in, but also with regard to live births in the district. So if you look at pages 7 and 8, give you a 10-year picture, and the live births in the district since 2008 have remained relatively stable. Small minus, but as you look at the trend line, pretty stable. That in itself is not bad news. Not great news, but it's not bad news. Most school districts in this state would die for stable, okay? Let's take a look at the next page. As you can see, the same, even though we go back 6 years, let's go back 6 years now, same kind of picture. There's a stability in the number of live births by residents of your school district. However, let's take a look at page 9. This is real data. There's no what-if data here. Top of page 9. There's the 10-year pattern of your kindergarten enrollment. The pattern is significantly different than the number of live births. Again, there's no magic formula here. What that shows is you've had an influx of children on a regular basis over the past 10 years, and if you look at the chart below, which is continuing over the past 6 years, the most recent past, of young people who were born somewhere else but moved in with their families, of course, and enroll in your kindergarten. And that all has to do with your housing market and the attraction of families from somewhere else who had their children somewhere else coming to Yorktown. Okay? So, let's take a look at, if you would, let's combine those two pieces of real data. If you go to page 11, here we show both patterns of hard and fast data that we know are accurate. So at the top, we look at the past 10 years. And you'll notice that, and this actually, bless you, this actually shows this influence of young people born somewhere else but move here and enroll in Yorktown kindergarten. You'll see that your enrollment over the past 10 years, K enrollment has a very positive trend. But compared to, as we already know from the previous charts, your live births in the district actually have, over those past 10 years, have dropped. All right? Residents who've been here are having fewer babies. However, you've got young children coming in, preschoolers, who end up as your kindergartners. Let's take a look at the past 6 years. And what's exciting about this is, over the past 6 years, some of those households who moved in with children born somewhere else have been here long enough that in all likelihood, as residents, they're beginning to have more children. Because look at your K enrollment, again, increasing, looking at it as a 6-year span, even more positively than looking at it over 10 years, but look what's occurred to your live births over from 2014 through 2019, a positiveness with regard to those live births. So you have residents here already, because let me explain it. How we know that is the hospitals of the state and the health department are very good in tracking live births. In other words, my kids were never born in my school district that I was a superintendent, because even though we had a hospital, we went to Rochester. All of my kids were born in Monroe County, but they were registered in the district where the father and mother lived. So we know it's pretty accurate what the health department does with all of the hospitals and where children are born. So we're pretty solid on those number of births in your school district. So that pattern is continuing. Well, so what might that mean for the future? I guess let's look at page 17, give you a picture of the kindergarten enrollments. Some demographers kind of spend a lot of time on saying, well, you've got this many seniors graduating, how many are taking their place? I don't do that, simply because you have so many other factors about migration of older children and older families. Often, for example, families will not move in if their child is starting high school. Okay, so there's a factor there. They'll stay where they are, but then they'll move earlier before high school. All of those kind of social decisions come into a family's decision. I like to center on kindergarten and live births. So if you look at page 17 at the bottom, there's your history since 2015. Over the past 5 years, you've had an average of 232 kindergartners in your district. So if we look at the enrollment projections for the next 5 years, and depending upon, and we can talk more about what low, mid, and high means, but if you want to look at it very, very conservatively, it's suggesting you'll have about 206 on average over the next 5 years, which is a little fewer, but it doesn't take into account some of the more positive elements that we've been looking at. The mid-range suggests you'll have 241. Now, the high range is at 268 on average. And let me give it a little, now, let's talk a little bit about low, mid, and high. The high range in particular is, high range, the most optimistic. However, as you look at the study, that high range is based on an assumption. And that's why I bring this up first, is because the credibility or the likelihood of that option is not far-fetched. It's based on the pattern of your kindergarten enrollment over the past 6 years. Just looking at that. What if that pattern of 6 years, and we saw the picture of that, what if that pattern continued for the next 5? Forget live births, forget the housing market, forget everything. Just if that pattern, which we know is accurate, you report it, that's your enrollment, if that pattern continued for the next 5 years. So that's what that's based on. So there's not a lot of hypothetical, lots of variables thrown at that. It's just that if all the conditions that have existed for the past 5 years in your district continue for the next 5, might that pattern of kindergarten enrollment continue? And if it did, what would it look like? That's what it would look like. So, if we could, let's take a look at, here's one that folks often ask about, and it's really a non-item in your district, but I think it's important to share it. Take a look at page 22. This is the data that the district has concerning non-public and homeschool enrollment. And you can, even though I do some calculations, again, none of these calculations massage the data. All they do is organize it so you can look at it a little easier, in a sense, putting your thoughts and assumptions about what it might mean. But even if you look at the chart at the top, which is just a table, you can visually see the reduction in the numbers of folks, households, who've made the decision to go to a non-public school or to homeschooling. Okay? Down below, what this suggests is that on average, you can look. That chart below gives each year, and you can see what's occurred. And you had, for example, in 2019-20, you had 187 young people in all non-public settings, which is about 5.4% of your public school enrollment. So, if you were looking at the future and new housing to be conservative, you might say, okay, let's just minus about 5% of the children who might live in new housing. Be conservative. You can't say that they will go to non-public or they will, but your culture is such, about 5% of your public school enrollment goes to non-public. So as you look at new housing, I would take that into account. Now, it's conservative, but it gives you an idea that, well, people do make choices, and that's been your pattern culturally in your district for since 2014-15. So, good news. There are districts who range. There are districts with falling enrollment, and you always look at, is it private school flight? Well, that's certainly not the case here. In fact, it's the opposite. You've got folks making the decision that, yep, Yorktown is where I want my child to go. So, if you look at, let's talk about the housing market in 25 and 26. Again, this is an update to the previous study. So all of the information, which was quite extensive, that I got from the realtor, Mr. John Kincaid, still applies. Here's the newest data that he added since the last time I talked to him. And that's on the top of page 25. He says home prices are up by 6 or 7%. He's also saying that he is finding that he has an increase. This is from the, last year when I talked to him. So from last year to this year, he's beginning to see an increase, and he shared that other realtors are saying the same thing, of home buyers in their late 20s and 30s knocking on the door, looking for a home. And it's interesting. I'll show you a chart of the census data, and it backs that up in a minute. Also, and this is not uncommon to Yorktown, he's beginning to see, and also the census data bears that out, as we'll show in a minute, he reports an increase of renting by millennial clients. And you got to remember, millennials mean, as my son, who's 35, reminds me, he says, Dad, don't forget I'm a millennial. I'm 35, but I'm still a millennial. So now we're not just talking, remember when this whole term started, we're talking about like teens and 20s. Now they're in their 30s, which, by the way, are these folks knocking on John's door and the other realtors' doors. They have a tendency to want to rent, which is a little different than, well, certainly the different generations represented here, right? You got married, got to buy a house, and then the next house. Well, there's a little different take on, not by all, but it's an upswing here, even here, that millennials are saying, no, housing is a commodity. I'd rather use my resources for other things. And I think, I like what John said. I think he's been talking to a lot of folks, including these people, because that term, that's why I quoted it, to buy life experiences. That seems to be a pattern with millennials. But let's look at below. On December 27th, and I waited a little longer than Ron wanted for this update because I wanted to double, triple, quadruple check one more time with the town and the codes people. Okay, that's your best source of information about what's happening, even though some of the people I talked to are on the codes board and all that. But the town are good folks. They have to, by their job, give you the best indication of what's happening with various possible residential projects. I list the three and what they told me, and I quoted exactly what they said. Okay? So you can see with the 26 townhomes, the Roma project, as well as the Bear Mountain, that's what they're suggesting is the status of them. That doesn't mean they're not going to happen, but that's where they were as of December 27th. So I said to myself, okay, and that's kind of similar to what it was a year ago. So I wanted to give you a tool that is you, local people, local knowledge, you're here, you talk to people, you see what's in the local paper, you may run into somebody and you may hear something different the next 3, 6, 7 months. A tool by which you could use without having to ringy-dingy me, even though you can ringy-dingy me anytime you want, but a tool that you can use if you wish to try to, what might this mean? Well, first of all, the housing market has been a driver of enticing families to move into your district, particular families who've had kids somewhere else. So you got to weigh, and that's why I give you the caution from Ycsd and a manual they have about school planning. Is this just a pattern, a general cultural pattern of what's been occurring in the district, or is it really added units? Well, of course they're added units, but your market has been a main driver of enticing new residents with children to move in your district. So you have to weigh, would these new units be just part of that great pattern to continue that happening, that is, people moving into the district with children born somewhere else, or should you add it on top of that pattern? Okay? At this point, I'm suggesting you look at it, at this point, looking at it as that these would represent the normal and usual set of house parcels that would be purchased by folks along with the big asset you have is your existing housing inventory is very, as John says, people want your kind of housing that you have. It's affordable, it's nice. And I'm not saying this superficially, a good school district in the right location is enticing folks to want to come here. So I'm suggesting, particularly just these three, the 26 townhomes, the 45 Roma project, and even if Bear Mountain ever gets started, that, if it was 184, we'd really have to see what they were and how they were marketing them, okay? That might be an add-on. But the other two, I would suggest, are just normal pattern of existing and some new housing to keep enticing folks to want to live here, all right? On the other hand, that's why I said, well, but let's help these folks as you look at these things to give you some factors you might want to use in your own discussions about what it might mean. And I do that at the bottom of page 26, okay? At the bottom of 26, my approach is to use local data and local patterns, okay? There are some models out there that take nationally how many people and kids live in townhomes. Not bad. It's the Purdue model. I don't use that because, in all honesty, Texas isn't Yorktown Heights, and Yorktown Heights isn't Chicago. I think there's enough data locally to have a substantiated pattern of how many and who lives in the district that is your home. So based on your data, I would suggest the following, that we know that if you took all of the households in your district, which we know is a matter of record, and we divide it into the number of children you have served in public school, each household has on average 0.49 kids. Simple little thing. So if you add 100 homes and you don't know who they're going to be sold to yet, you could, again, you have to make some adjustments if you know who they're going to be sold to. What I mean by that is, if there are 100 two-bedroom homes, you're probably not even going to get 0.49, because families don't normally, even single heads of households don't normally buy or rent a two-bedroom, even single head, which is a major portion of all of our communities now, because it's just not enough room, okay? So you probably, if there were 100 townhomes, probably with only two bedrooms, probably you wouldn't even approach the 49 possible children in that. But be conservative. It's always better to be ready to serve and say, oops, not as many came, than the other way around, and underestimate the number of children who may knock on your door and say, hi, I'm here, serve me, and you don't want to not have room, okay? That's why, if you remember, when we did this, the larger study, we recommended highly in your planning that when you look at pupil capacity, build in about an 8 to 10% planned unallocated pupil capacity. Not just for the tendency if more kids came, you know, say that the townhomes did attract single parent households and one parent and they had, you know, a youngster, and that's what everybody lived in there. Because it's not only because of that, because you need the flexibility anyway with regard to how you deliver your curriculum. As you know, as board member, you'll sit here and you'll listen to great presentations and new ideas, and often, they don't always take a lot of money, but you know what? They always take some kind of space to do a good new idea for kids. So building in about an 8 to 10% just is good sense for a lot of reasons, including the potential of the housing at this point that may come about. Now, if you assume, you know what, no, let's be more conservative. Let's assume all of those 45 Roma project residences are going to be occupied by families. And I give you an asterisk of what family means. In your district, a household that's considered a family, as defined by the census, has 0.62 kids in every household, on average. See where I'm going? So you can look at, no, let's even be more conservative. And that's up to you. For example, if you look at all the households in your district that have someone 18 years or younger, on average, there are 1.47 children age 0 to age 18 in every home that has somebody under 18. That's probably the most conservative, that is the highest number of young people you could expect from a project. But don't forget, that includes 0 to 5 also. So it's not a 1.47 that would show up immediately in your grade level. So I hope that helps. It's a simple little tool, but you know, as you hear things, you can refer to this and say, gee, okay, well, what might that mean for us? Okay? Now, I caution you if there is a project, which there isn't one now, but there might be, that was for people over 55. Oh, no, no kids will be there. Well, I caution you on that because often that will have an impact on your existing market, especially in communities where people like to live. Let me explain. Often in a community, there isn't enough what are called patio homes or homes for empty nesters who really don't want to move. My family's here, my doctor's here, my shopping's here, I like it here, my friends are here, but I really don't need my 3 or 4 bedroom home. But often the market doesn't have that quality downsize home that they may want to go into. So what happens in communities where you get a developer says, oh, don't worry, because demographers hired by developers always downplay the effect on schools, because that's what they're hired to do. But anyway, even if you had 40 or 30, even 25, what are called patio homes, that very well may have an impact on your existing market in the sense that you may have, and this is where you keep in touch with people like John and other realtors, that, gee, have you got ringy-dingies from people who live in town in family-sized homes interested in that new development? At the very least, find that out, because if that's the case, given your history of having a housing market that attracts families, that doesn't necessarily mean that that patio home over 55 won't have an impact on families moving in. So how do you know that? It's America. We don't sign up to tell what we're looking for or what we're going to do, but the realtors and codes people are really helpful people. They have their ear to the ground, and they can give you insights as you hear about possible projects like that. So with that, let's take a look at, let's take a look at 27 and 28 briefly. By the way, what I did, when we did the study last time, we gave you data from 2000, we compared the census data from 2008 to 2012 with census data from 2013 to 2017. Well, I'm happy, and that's another reason I waited till December, because the new census data came out the first week in December. So I wanted to give you the latest. This is the latest for a whole year, okay? There won't be any newer data until next December. But I want you to have the demographics of your school district. So what you have here are the demographics comparing the 5 years from 2009 to 2013 with 2014 to 2018. The 2014-2018 data came out in December. It's like 90 days old. Okay, it takes a whole year for the census to gather that data. Interesting kind of things. One I point out to you is the second one, the median age. This is uncommon in this part of the state as well as in most of New York State except for large urban areas. And what I'm talking about is your median age. The median age has only slightly increased, slightly, by 1/10 of a year. You say, well, big deal, Paul. They're still older. Yeah, okay. But the childbearing years end at 44. So the median, right, 50% of your population is below 44 or 43.9 and 50% are above 43.9, says that you still have a large cohort of folks. Doesn't guarantee you're going to have more kids, but the median age suggests you certainly as a district have the capability for families to have more children that will enter their kids into Yorktown. That is unusual. Typically, there'll be a 2, 3, 4-year difference between comparing a 5-year set with the next 5-year set. That is not the case here. Now, it's not in the 30s, like I just reported in a school board last week. That's a different setting. It's a lower socioeconomic city. So anyway, that data says a lot about the community that you're serving as a school district. A couple other small things I want to point out. Page 29 If you look at the number of women 15 to 50, all who had a birth over the past 12 months, you'll see on average it was 153 people over those first 5 years from 2009 to 2013, and there's been an upswing, okay, to 262, which kind of fits. Kind of interesting. Look at the number of grandparents just below that, 2 items below. Number of grandparents living with own grandchildren under 18. Kind of interesting. There's been an increase in generations living within a household. Okay? And that could be for a lot of reasons. You probably know better than I locally because there's no database to suggest why. There's no survey of these people. It could mean grandparents who can't find a patio home, have a large enough home, and say, gee, here, you take over the family estate, just let me live here. Again, it doesn't sound like a lot. It's only 477, but it's interesting to see how intergenerations are making different decisions, and that's why I point that out. Okay? This is remember what John said? Look at page 30. Renter occupied. You have an upswing of over 3% more households being rented in your district than they were the previous 5 years. So that upswing of people making rental decisions versus buying decisions, certainly buying is the way to go at Yorktown in most nice suburban districts like this. But you have this upswing of rentals, which is, see what happens the next 5 years. See if that pattern continues. So this is interesting. It's not a lot, but again, I'm just one of those old educators that anything to do with kids, I don't care if it's a slight increase or not, you take note, I take note of. Page 31, interesting, the data suggests that with regard to poverty, you're it's all relative about volume of poverty, as we all know. That sounds odd, of course. But from 2009 to 2013, only about 1.1% of all people under 18 in your district lived in poverty the previous 12 months. Well, it jumped to 2.4. It's just, it's still, again, 2.4 is like low, but you know, it's relative. I just point that out. There might be some, I don't know, it's good for discussion. Gee, are we, with any of these young people, what might we be doing to help out, so to speak, if a principal comes across 2 or 3 or 4, certainly more than they had the previous 5 years. It's something for good discussion about children and program, okay? And then let's go back to, here's one, page 32. You might say, gee, that's pretty esoteric, Paul. Well, I'm just, as you can tell, enthused and enticed that for such a long period of time, you've had this pattern of attracting households with kids born somewhere else. Well, I like to dig deeper, and that's, I think, what the last check mark on page 32 suggests. Take a look, this looks like an odd piece of data, but in 2014, 73% of all the parents and families with children 6 to 17 were in the workforce. In 2018, all of the parents and families with children 6 to 17, your clients, are in the workforce. A jump of 7% of all parents in a family, or all adults in a family, in the workforce. Then I combine that with another interesting piece of census data, is this. It doesn't sound like much, but it's on average now for your total population. So when I say that, I suggest it is an impact. That in 2014, the average travel time to work for the people who work, the adults who work in your community, was 33.2 minutes. Okay? Well, now it's 37.4. Is that because of bad roads? Well, again, just a personal opinion. I just took some of those roads. They're better than they were 5 years ago. I mean, So you've got more families with both folks in the household in the workforce, and they're taking longer to go to work and come home. So what does that mean? It's like, gee, we got enough problems in school. Well, it's a good point of discussion as you look at things like transportation policy for daycare. You may you may even, for example, your socioeconomically, Yorktown is in good shape. On the other hand, you may want to look to have relationships with YMCAs and YWCAs for after-school care as an asset for your community. They pay for it, you don't. Again, it might suggest that, gee, should we look at school emergency closings differently or with even more communication or lead time? Those kinds of things in service to your public, the data suggests you might want to look at, okay? And with that, we end with taking a look at the end, again, going back to the summary of enrollment. If you go to page 33, so, the most optimistic projection for K3 over the next 5 years is that you might increase by 175 pupils in K3. That's 4 grade levels divided into 1. That's your most optimistic. Now that means all the lines, all the moons have to line up. But don't forget, remember what I said earlier, what that's based on is not flim-flam variables. It's taking a look at your 6 years of kindergarten enrollment and projecting that same pattern for the next 5 years. Pretty solid, down-to-earth looking at data. So, your 4-5 enrollment may increase by 94 pupils over the next 5 years. Your grade 6-8 may increase by 176 over the next 8 years. And that's probably, as you get with older kids, older grade levels, the validity or the credibility of the numbers gets stronger because, right, you can pretty much go count those kids right now, all right? And then if you look at your high school, you may, over the next 10 years, increase by 177. Now you might say, gee, Paul, why this 5, 8, and 10? Because that's how the commissioner expects schools to do their planning. Elementary, 5 years out, middle years, 8 years out, high school, 10 years out, as you plan for programs, as well as you plan for facilities. And with that, any questions?
Dr. Seversky, thank you so much. You took 68 pages of data and you were pretty succinct, so I appreciate the way that you clarified some of the information. So I appreciate that. I'm sure the board appreciates that as well. I'll leave it, obviously, for the board. You actually answered all the questions that I had coming into tonight. You answered in the presentation, so I don't have any questions for you, but I know that I can always get in touch with you with questions.
Do you have questions?
Yeah. You have a page, or do you, go ahead, or just an item? Okay.
I'm sorry. Do I need a page?
No.
No.
Okay. I thought you had about the study. That's
Just ask
okay.
a question.
Okay, thanks. So I'm most interested in the data you have for the enrollment and increased enrollment. A couple of things. The last thing you said, the increase from 1 to 3, 175 people possibly.
The most optimistic, yes.
The most optimistic.
Yep.
I understand. So as it moves forward from 3 to 5, how does that equate from 6 to 8? The increase in enrollment from 3 to 5 would be 175, optimistically. From K to 3, I mean. So from moving forward, how does that equate to the upper grades? So if it's 175 from 3 to, what I'm trying to understand is, if I have an increased enrollment in 3 to 5, does that increase the enrollment all the way through?
It will impact that, but don't forget, you're doing it over, K to 3 is over 4 years.
Right.
In your configuration, your next configuration is over 2 years. So that's why, in other words, that's why over the next 5 years, first of all, your number of live births take a long time to start impacting the grade levels. They impact, as trite as it sounds, they impact the younger grades first. So when they get into K3, it's only those youngsters that will influence the 4-5, but that you're looking at is only a pattern, a set of 2 years, not 4 years. That's why it's only 94 pupils 5 years out.
Okay.
Does that help?
A little
Then
bit.
you're right, for the future, 6-8, right? So if somebody born this year, 2020,
Right.
they enter school in 5 years. Again, it could be 6, but we go 5 because it'll all even out. That's in 2025. So they won't impact grade 6 until 2031, which is longer than 8 years. So as I mentioned to you earlier, the grades 6, 8, and 9, 12 are based on the historical pattern of your year-to-year enrollments of kids that you already have. So that's probably the most valid data that you can really.
Right, you said the next 5 years, optimistically, the enrollment could go up 268 throughout, in the beginning. That was page, I don't know.
Well, in K3, I have divided out by,
Right,
yeah,
that optimistically, for the next
175,
5 years.
right.
Well, no, I got the number 268, optimistically, from 206 to 268, I think it was. Neither here nor there, but the enrollment, as you can see, panelly is going to go up,
yeah.
as you can see, and that's just not only through birthing, it's through people moving in and new homes.
Yeah,
possibly.
and there, again, this is not an absolute, it's using, again, it's a study of patterns. So, there's a new pattern developing. Even before the feds drop the prime, which they're probably going to drop it again, okay, just an hour away in Oxford, Connecticut, I couldn't believe it, my son got a mortgage for 3.25%.
Right, so
The point I'm
unfor-
making is,
Right.
as other variables like that happen, okay, that will influence what happens in your housing.
Right, and as you know, because you know schooling, you're a superintendent, right?
Sure.
We have to prepare, right?
Yep.
With teachers and buildings.
Right.
If we have an enrollment increase in next 5 years for almost 300 students, certainly we have to prepare for that now.
So, yeah, we have
That's
to
what I'm
look at
worried
it
about. I
from-
mean, certainly more teachers, more space.
And facility, yeah. that's the big
Facilities,
deal, is
so
the
that's why I'm
facility.
asking these questions to see.
Absolutely.
You know,
Right,
thank you for
right.
such
We've
detail.
got the two K3 buildings, that's probably your biggest challenge. What
Right.
do you do there?
Exactly right. We have
What do
big
you do
challenges
there?
ahead of us, and we have to talk about what we're going to do about that. But thank you for
Right.
all your help. We
Yep.
appreciate it.
Pete, did you have a question?
The average kindergarten enrollment was 232, correct?
Over 5 years, yeah.
Over 5 years.
Yeah.
And we graduate typically 250 kids, more than that,
Yeah, like
in our year, right? So how my simple mind works is if only 250 come in a year and 350 go out in a year, where does it all catch up in the middle? Is that what you were talking about, how more families are moving in somewhere in elementary school and grade school and middle school to make up for the people that started in kindergarten?
Well, I think the best way to answer this is, what I was talking about are kids focusing on your potential kindergarten enrollment, because that's the most speculative. Because
Okay?
you can't just go knock on people's door and say, are you going to have a, okay, you can't do that. But, I guess you could, but I'm not doing it. Anyway, so if you look at the pattern of live births with regard to your kindergarten enrollment, so we're just looking at kindergarten, that's where that enters in. But the best way to answer your question is actually look at the data. And if you could, if you turn to, I'll give you an example, if you turn to page, and you can look at it as opposed to just listening to it, you can actually see the pattern. And that is at the end of the study. I give you actually I give you the actual, I like people to see where the data came from. If you turn to page 61, if you could, can you?
Sure.
Again, in my style, I like to show my work. I don't want you to take my word for anything. So I actually give you the calculation.
Okay?
All right, now, first of all, should not pay attention to K-12 totals. They're not relevant. They really aren't. What's relevant is what's shaded. See the 24, 25, K-6, that's relevant for planning. Here's why. Any enrollments for K-6 that are older than 5 years out in the future have lower and lower and lower validity. Okay? That's important to remember. Now, so as you look at this, you see the math, how basically, look at your pattern, see the average ratio. This answers your question about migration. In your district, your insights were correct, because if you look at the on average ratio, you have more kids who end a grade level, and you have more kids who show up at the next grade level in September. You see that 1.054?
Yep.
Okay? But look at that, right across until you get to grade 10, which typically not a lot of kids move in after grade 10, right, as a parent who wants to move, who wants to. So that's the only year that you're less than 100% of the 10th graders go into 11th grade. But look how close, you can't get close to 99.7. I guess you could, 99.9. So you have such a stability of, one, people staying, but also you have a pretty good pattern that even in the school years, you have a migration of people moving in, not just because they're young in kindergarten. So see how it's taken into account?
Yep.
So that's why this is more telling than saying, well, you got 220 12th graders go out, and how many we got getting in? That doesn't help your planning about how do you serve the younger kids versus the older kids. Does that help?
It does.
And you can look at low, mid, and high, and you can see how it impacts those grade levels. And frankly, just like Anthony said, what does that mean and how you're going to serve those age grade levels in the facilities that you have or don't have? Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike? Rashmi?
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question to what Pete was
Sure.
asking. Trying to find the page number, but anyway, the graph where you show the projected kindergarten enrollment, that's based on live births, right? And that's also based on people moving in. But my question is, does it factor in people that are here and will potentially have more children?
Yeah. Because-
How do you estimate that, or?
Well, I don't,
Okay.
because it's your live births that tell us this. For example, the live births that the New York State Health Department gives us for your district
Right.
are of all residents. So those live births are of your residents, not of anybody moving in. So the delta between how many kids that show up for kindergarten is a combination of both. How many were born here, which we have data, we know how many, and therefore how many should, right, show up 5 years later. But if you look at your ratios, if you didn't have people moving in, you know what the ratio would be? You would hope for 1 to 1. If we had 100 kids born 5 years earlier, 5 years later, we would hope we'd have 100. So you'd have a ratio of 1. In your district, the ratios are all above 1. So that delta between 1, and I can show you that it's chart number 4, and we can go to that page. Anything over 1 is a quantification of the impact of families moving in with kids born somewhere else. Does that
Correct.
help?
Yes.
So that's how we take into account both of those.
I understand you're splitting it.
Okay? You okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
Lisa?
you.
Yeah, how do our enrollment projections compare with other districts in the area?
Your area, this county or Long Island, all of this?
Yeah, just our
Well,
neighboring districts.
It's kind of interesting. I won't name the districts, that would be unfair. But I have worked with 2 neighboring districts. One of them is dropping enrollment profusely. Quality district like yours, quality, socioeconomic level, maybe even higher than yours. Okay?
What district was that?
I'm not telling you. No, it's not fair. Ron tells you, there's this code, you don't compare districts, you just don't. It's just the way it goes. Another district smaller than yours is facing the same thing, lower enrollments. In fact, Westchester County, if you look at the pattern, just Westchester County, again, you're not in the county, but just to give you an idea, Westchester County, over the past 6 years, they've lost the equivalent of a mid-sized school district in births.
Wow.
Okay, but it was worse before. Actually, it's getting better. I mean, there's been an upswing of births where before 6 years ago, it was even worse.
So why?
Why? Where people wish to live, the kind of housing that exists, movement of empty nesters like me, who say, we either have housing to go to in the district where they live, because that's where they want to live. Remember we talked about earlier, my family's here, or there isn't, so they don't move. Not everybody's flying to Florida, or not flying, nobody's flying. It's kind of an interesting, ever since 9/11, unfortunately, saddest thing that ever happened, but people are making different decisions about where they live, okay? Not everybody's going and buying in Florida or Arizona, you know, especially when they find out, and this is a true story, from a realtor out of the Capital District. Paul, he says, yeah, I get empty. I always ask this question. They'll get an empty nester, like in a year or two, will call back and say, I need to come back. And they say, well, why? He says, well, you didn't, and they were joking, but they weren't joking. You didn't tell me that the flood insurance in Florida was more than I was paying in property taxes in New York. Seriously. So there's a lot of variables that happen with that. But this whole thing about safety and being family, that's an element. Working with a district on Long Island, much like yours, probably the same socioeconomic level, quality program. And the reason I say that, because I visited your programs. I'm an old English teacher, so you kind of know what you see. I can't lie to you, okay? Anyway, so, but they're experiencing a huge drop in enrollment. It's not because of bad schools or anything, it's just that it's a location on the island where empty nesters like me just refuse to move. And there's no land at all for even small projects like even you have potentially listed. So there's no new households, and folks they just don't want to move. So you got to have kids, you got to have families to give us clients. So does that help the Capital District? I'll name the district because it's been a couple of years. Niskayuna, similar to your district, high quality program. Outside the Capital District, professional community like yours, growing like crazy compared to other schools around it that are either stable or dropping. Not because they're bad schools, it's just back to the housing market. It has a housing market with a varied kinds of housing that people want, and people are moving in. So it all goes back to location, 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 the amenities of the community, and again, of course, and again, the examples I gave you are all high-quality schools, and I'm not just making that up. They really are high quality. But those other variables may be missing in those schools.
I have one other question.
Yeah.
You talked about the increase in the rentals in
Yeah.
our community. How does that affect enrollment? Does that increase our enrollment, decrease our enrollment? Are they more likely to have kids in our schools?
Well, people look at that a lot of ways. Sometimes districts look at more rentals negatively because people make the wrong, not that you have, but some will wrongly assume that if you rent, you're of a lower social economic level than the rest of the community. And that's not the case, especially with millennials. And again, I didn't bring that up. John did, who earns his living doing this, okay? So I don't think that's a factor, all right? I'll just say it that way. It's not because people can't afford to buy, they just choose not to. But you see, what they're renting is not, you have a set of apartments, but they're renting houses. So that's a major factor, okay, as opposed to even 2 or 3 bedroom apartments, where that may or may not lend itself to be a place you want to begin raising a family. So I don't think that's a negative. I think what it does show is that your flexibility of your housing market, you're attracting both kinds of folks who want to buy, like we were brought up to do, and those who say, no, I want to live there, I want to rent. You got both happening for you. Because here's the danger. It's probably a strong word. Danger is a strong word. Your housing market and the turnover of your housing market is what's fueling your enrollment increases. So looking at what might stop that, okay? So then right now you're relying on people having kids who live here, and you're relying on people coming in with kids born somewhere else. So look at what might stop that influx of families choosing to live here in Yorktown who had kids born somewhere else. Okay? An environmental issue. And again, I picked that because I know it's not on the table. You get what I mean? Just think of the things that could inhibit, all right, people wanting to come here. You have some...
When your mean demographics, when your mean age starts to go down, that means people are going to be here longer.
Yep.
And theoretically, less people would move in because they're not turning over their home.
If they choose not to turn it over. Right. It's exciting what's happening, but think about what could stop that housing turnover. Okay? It's not negative. It's just normal, right? We make decisions as adults. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up.
But also,
Go ahead.
if, when you think about the apartments, and the data says that for every one home, there's .49.
Yep.
So a household is a household is a household. So regardless of whether it's an apartment or a house, it's going to be
Right.
.49.
Yeah. That's been the characteristic of your culture at Yorktown. Is it different in other districts? Yes. See, that's why I like to rely on what's it been here. You see, I suggest communities attract a similar demographic of the people already living here. Okay? Unless there's some noticeable major, for example, if suddenly, this is way off the deep end. If suddenly, say the federal government, and there's no land to do it, put in an army base here of thousands, like Watertown City, thousands of people, 15,000 troops. Different demographic than who lives here, right? Younger, okay? That would change the pattern. But none of that's happening. If anything, you do have a couple of things, and I'm going to stop. But when I talk to the town, there are two major properties that are in your district. But if they do get rented for business offices, one is is it the Verizon building or the IBM building, and there's one other big complex, quality. It's not in your district. But I even brought it up to John because you see, we already know people like moving here. So imagine, right, within that 30 minutes of driving time, those two get rented, and they're huge.
Yeah.
And think about who would be there. It'd be the similar kind of demographic of folks who live here. That could have a major impact. In fact, in all likelihood, you probably won't have enough housing inventory to deal with it, but I'll bet you your housing prices will go up because the volume of people wanting to live here.
Can I ask a question? Tom, when did we put in full-day kindergarten? What year?
7 years ago? 7 years
Is
ago,
it
I believe?
seven?
6 years ago?
So 2012?
Around then,
So does that have anything to do with the reduction in private school and homeschool enrollment in our district?
It could. On the other hand, I'm looking at this quickly, and I think not to the extent you might, and here's why. If you go back to the page 61 that we used with Peter, and
Yeah.
I'll give you a data that suggests that you still have a set of folks who are choosing, particularly at the kindergarten, like preschool, and they stay for kindergarten. Again, just that. Take a look at, notice that you have 5.4% more kids show up to first grade than there were in kindergarten. Now, that's not all because of private school, but usually that's an indicator of families who say, well, they started in preschool, you know, in a setting, especially in the kind of settings that a community like yours has to offer, and they decide to stay for kindergarten. I think you still have some of that, all right? As far as the rest of the school years, I can't really say the reason why. I would hope it is because of the quality of education. There hasn't been any, to my knowledge, any major closures of private schools. Unless I'm mistaken, in my research, I didn't see any. So it comes down to either it's too much money, but even if it is, usually money isn't the final, it's, right, as parents, right? Yeah, okay, money's money, but I want the best for my kid. Well, they're coming here. The data says that. Could still be tuition money that they don't want to pay, but usually people will weigh for their youngster as opposed to the money they're paying in tuition.
So the reduction in the private school or the homeschool is more likely due to the quality of our education,
I
not
would
that we
think
had
so,
full-day.
and people making
Okay.
decision that financial, like, gee, I can get a quality education, I don't have to pay a tuition. I mean, let's be pragmatic, and vice versa, you know, more opportunity and no disrespect to private education, because it's America, you have the right to do what you want with your child.
Right. I think we had an initial bump the year we went
Yeah.
to full-day
you would?
kindergarten. The next year, there was about 30 more
Yeah.
students, but it leveled off after that. It hasn't
Yeah.
continued to grow.
Yeah, that usually is what happens. Yep. Because if you notice, we're going back to 2014, 15, right through 1920. So it's after you had it. So it's kind of like part of your culture now,
Okay.
okay?
All right. Does anybody else have another question?
Can I ask one more question, please? So the tool that you have presented, right? The numbers in there, are they applicable only for townhouses or rentals? Or would, like, if we had a 20, 40 home, subdivision coming up, could we still use those same numbers, or we would use the numbers in the subsequent pages?
I think so. For example, if you had which you don't have, but say you had a 40, let's take your example, a 40-home subdivision with 3+ bedrooms, and the developer says, I'm marketing this to families because we've got 4 to 5 bedrooms. Okay? So what I would suggest is that you would use possibly the higher factor and say, okay, the developer's saying that. Again, until it's sold and whatever, you really don't ever know. But if they're saying, I'm building these $600,000 homes with 4+ bedrooms, unless somebody, an empty nester, has a lot of train sets that they need 4 bedrooms for, you're probably not gonna, you're gonna probably have a household that either has children and will probably add to those children. I mean, common sense will say that. So if they're saying that, 40 homes, and they're meant for families, then accept that, and then I would use the higher one at 1 point, I think it's, what's it, 1.67?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be a good planning tool. Now, don't expect all of them to have on average 1.67, but back to what I said earlier, it's better to say, and I say this as an old superintendent, board, I was wrong. It actually came out a little less than what I estimated, but we're ready. As opposed to the other way around, uh-oh. No, really. And see, and you might say, that's why I related earlier, you always try to have that 10% factor, and that's not a fudge factor. It's like, it's America. You can only look at patterns to decide what Americans are going to decide to do, especially with public schools and where they want to live, all right? But last thing, and I know we should be over, page 27, because it had questions about age. If you look at page 27, I give you a chart of your age demographics. Look at the bump. Look at the bump comparing the 5 years, 10 years ago, the first set of 5 years compared to the next 5 years. Look at that bump in the population in your district of 25 to 34-year-olds. Those are, I'd be concerned if they were 20 to 24-year-olds, because they probably, one could assume, are college graduates who didn't get a job and came back home to live. I'm being facetious, but I'm not. No, these are 25 to 34-year-olds. Here I'm going. Look at that. You had a bump of over 2.6% in your demographic of that cohort in your district. That's prime family childbearing years, okay? So that you have a large cohort of those people living in your district. No guarantee you're going to have kids, but certainly you have a large cohort that the potential is certainly there as you continue into the future, okay? And also the question about older folks, you can see the pattern of you still, from 75 to 85 and over, you're about the same. You notice you did get a bump from the 80 to 70-year-old folks. You see that? The black boxes, the jump. Well, you might say, well, oh dear. Well, you can look at it 2 ways. First of all, isn't that nice that people want to live here, even though they're getting old like me? But also what that says is, how might that bump in those 2 cohort age groups, might that mean there might be even a positive effect on our housing inventory for sale, because those folks are getting to an age where it's patio home or not, in all likelihood, you're right? I'm saying it nicely, but,
Yeah.
right? So you got to look at it that way too. Enough, I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. This
Thank
was
you, I'm
very
excited for you.
informative.
It's kind of, it's always you always hope you have, because without clients, we don't have jobs and we don't have the duty to do. So, anyway, thank you all
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you.
So I'll continue on if that's
Yes.
okay. This evening, we also have the next presentation in our budget series. This evening features instruction, general and special education, and technology. Mr. Cole will deliver that presentation, and once the presentation is delivered, we'll have our Director of Technology and Director of PPS join us at the podium for any questions and answers that the board has. So, Mr. Cole, I turn the presentation over to you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Hatter. And ladies and gentlemen, this evening, we have the 6th presentation in our 7-part series for budget presentations in the following slides. We will discuss the entirety of the instruction portion of the budget. The organizational chart here depicts the instruction organization that reports to the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and then ultimately to the Superintendent of Schools. This chart represents nearly 500 employees in a variety of different capacities. Instruction includes an aligned curriculum that is under continuous review. This curriculum is paired with strong instructional practices, as well as a multifaceted assessment system that measures student growth. Student programs and services are available in order to serve all of our learners and support our philosophy of whole child learning. Instruction includes the integration of technology and opportunities available through comprehensive library media centers and eSTEAM labs. Here is a quick look at some of the BOCES services included in the budget for the 2020-21 school year. All of these services are being utilized in the current school year. The instructional staff throughout the school district includes, but is not limited to, the titles listed here on this chart. Our overarching goal is to provide enriched learning opportunities that support the whole child. Therefore, we continually focus on academics, social and emotional learning, performing arts, fine arts, athletics and physical education, character education in clubs, non-athletic teams, and organizations. The area of focus for 2020 and 2021 reflect a continued commitment to assess and review our curriculum and assessment practices to ensure all students are provided with an instructional program that will prepare them for opportunities in the future. We will continue to expand our implementation of eSTEAM learning within our curriculum. We will address areas of social emotional learning for our students. As we complete year one of the implementation of the school counselor plans reflecting the new regulations, we will review and revise as necessary. We will begin an exploration of the new computer science standards, compare our existing practices, and determine next steps. IDEA requires that school districts provide a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment to every student with a disability through the age of 21 or earlier if a high school diploma is awarded. The PPS department is responsible for following all key provisions of the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. Again, the organizational chart for pupil services. The director of PPS is Mr. Michael Rosen, and Ms. Karen Almeida is the assistant director. This chart reflects numbers of special education students from the October snapshot date for each year. We use the October date for each year to show trends. While the number of preschool students with disabilities decreased from 2018-19 as of the October snapshot, it is important to note that as of March 2, 2020, we have 118 preschool students receiving services with 17 referrals that are currently in process. It is anticipated that we will end the year with over 140 students receiving preschool services. Prior to the 2017-18 school year, the number of preschool students receiving services would range from 80 to 90 at the end of each school year. Total school-age students with disabilities is 538, of which 41 are placed in out-of-district special education programs. The total number of classified students has increased from the October snapshot for 2018-19 from 515 to 538. It's important to emphasize that a major focus is not only the increase in the number of students, but also the level of programs and services that are required to support student needs. The district continues to meet the needs of many students through the support of the 8-1+2 special class program, which currently supports students kindergarten through grade 12. The transitional support program at the high school and dialectical behavior therapy, along with the implementation of the skills training for emotional problem solving for adolescents program at the middle school and high school, are also key components that provide support for students within the Yorktown Central School District. The Pupil Personnel Department continually adjusts existing programs as needed to meet the needs of our students, and this chart lists the specific programs and locations that have been added since 2017-18 and the recommendations for additional programming and supports for the 2020-21 school year. In keeping with the regulations of New York State, the Yorktown Central School District is required to provide a special education services to school-aged non-resident students who attend private schools within the confines of the Yorktown Central School District. Our District of Location responsibilities currently include the following private schools: St. Patrick's, our Montessori, and the Talbot Torah Beth Yeshiel School. Students are eligible for Section 504 accommodation plans if they have a mental or physical impairment that substantially limits a major life activity and who are not eligible for services through IDEA. Yorktown Central School District utilizes a variety of combinations of special education programming, supports, and services to serve students within the least restrictive environment. This budget includes the costs for tuitions for students who were recommended for our out-of-district program. This chart indicates the number of students who attend other public school districts, Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES, Southern Westchester BOCES, private day schools, and residential placements. As noted previously, we currently have 18 students recommended by the Committee on Special Education who attend full-day special education programs within Putnam Northern Westchester and Southern Westchester BOCES. The budget includes costs for tuitions and related services for these students. There was an increase of 3 special education teachers for the 2019-20 school year based on student need. As per IEP mandates, additional special classes and integrated co-taught classes were added at the Brookside School, and a dual certified special education and math teacher was added at the high school for the 2019-20 school year. We are currently monitoring our maximum capacity for certain programs, and we may require additional personnel for next school year. The budget for the 2020-21 school year continues to support the 1 additional reading teacher position that was added for the 18-19 school year to support students who require additional reading support as mandated on the IEP. Due to increasing demands for occupational therapy evaluations, the 2020-21 budget includes funding to increase 3 occupational therapists who are currently in the CODA status. The budget also supports an additional behavioral consultant for Brookside and the middle school. We continue to review all CSC procedures to ensure compliance with all state mandates. As part of the eligibility process for special education, the CSC reviews all RTI data, which can include building-level intervention services in the areas of reading, math, speech, occupational therapy, and social-emotional supports. When planning for special education programs, we consider future needs over a multi-year period. For example, based on current trends in the area of social and emotional functioning of our students, we begin to explore programs and support services for our students. Utilizing district staff who have completed the requirements to become certified trainers in the area of therapeutic crisis intervention, we are planning to provide training to those staff members identified by their building principals and the pupil personnel department. We are currently planning to provide training to 2 cohorts during the summer of 2020. Continue to meet with building administrators and staff to review new programs and services to determine efficacy of the supports provided. Next, we'll move along to the technology section of the budget. With a small technology support staff, we are able to manage a state-of-the-art technology infrastructure that provides access to an ever-growing number of digital tools for over 4,000 users. Our successful partnership with EduTech, coupled with our district IT staff, enables us to offer the latest in mobile learning, online collaboration, and 24/7 access to learning content and resources. There's very little that happens in our school district that does not involve either the network and/or access to the internet. Our students and staff have come to expect immediate access to their own content and other web-based resources. We continue to build more mobile and flexible learning environments which support our Ycsd initiatives. We have a long-standing relationship with BestWeb, who has been our internet service provider for a number of years. We'll begin to upgrade our wireless environment during the spring and summer of 2020 for all of our buildings with full implementation before students and staff arrive in the fall. The district continues to use G Suite for education. Additional applications have been added to increase ease of use for our staff and students, as well as tighten security of our network. Additional applications and user support is listed here. Here's a sample of over 100 apps and software that are supported in the district. In order to support our CS and eSteam initiatives, we've expanded the use of Lego Mindstorms, Lego WeDo, Makey Makeys, 3D printing, and Scratch. We want our students to become creators, not just consumers. A flexible mobile learning environment is now the norm in classrooms. Students have access to iPads and Chromebooks in our elementary schools, and in the secondary schools, they are assigned a Chromebook to take home for 3 to 4 years. With the addition of more interactive TVs, we've expanded the use of casting technology with Chromecasts and Apple TVs for easier collaboration in the classroom. Now we will review the total costs of the instruction program. The total instruction portion of the budget increases as a result of our investment in teachers and the classroom environment. Total instruction investments will increase by nearly $1,365,000 during the 2020-21 school year, a 2.31% increase. We've captured the cost of all known retirements, new hires, and replacements in this summary chart. We continue to add new teaching and support positions in the budget to respond to any increases in enrollment or mandated services that may arise as the school year unfolds. The pie chart shown here provides a visual representation of the section-by-section cost detailed on the previous chart. Large investments are being made in instruction in the form of teachers and technology and support services. As seen here, the instruction portion of the budget will increase from 60.0 cents of every dollar spent to 60.18 cents of every dollar spent. The next presentation in our lineup will be the seventh and last by the Superintendent of Schools on March 30th, 2020, when he presents the proposed budget to the Board of Education. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. The directors and assistant superintendent are available for you here at the podium.
Do you want Betty to join us up here? Thank you, Tom. That was chock full of information.
This is why we're here, right? This one.
Yes, it is.
Move Kelsey back home.
We made you nice and tall, Mike, huh? We made you nice and tall. You got the short chair. You sit at the little kids' table. All right. Lisa, do you have any questions?
I do. My question is for Lisa. I guess one of the things that comes out of Dr. Saversky's study is that so many people want to move into our district. One of the reasons why they want to move into our district is that we have such amazing programming here. We invest a lot of money into our programming. I know we invested some money into our math program. Do we anticipate any large expenditures coming up into our programming?
So last year, we did invest a lot of money in our Into Math program at the K-5 level, and that contract will get us through the next 3 years of work with that publisher, which would provide PD and materials that our teachers need to implement that program for the next 3 years. The budget now does include funding that would be available for any necessary purchases as we move into our curriculum implementation, all levels K-12, as we look to move from the Common Core learning standards into the now required next generation learning standards. At the moment, we are looking across all grade levels and all content areas for what we need in each area. So for example, I know we've had conversations here about literacy at the K-5 level. We are continuing to explore our existing scope and sequence as we're building and expanding on that. We're also looking at any potential resources we might need to enhance that program. But that's just one snippet. We're looking across the board at all of our content areas. So at this point in time, there's not a specific large expenditure. We might have a variety of expenses, or we might have a larger expense. But either way, I feel confident with the money that we have that we can meet the needs of the students as we move forward.
Thank you.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I had a question regarding a slide that spoke to a behavior analyst at Brookside. I guess this would be for Mike. Do we anticipate needing that level of support at any of the other schools? And if so, how will we staff that position and accommodate that need?
Good question. So we currently utilize a consultant who comes in and supports us district-wide and supports students outside of the school district, does some home therapy for us, supports all of the buildings. What we've learned this particular year and started last year is that Brookside has grown in the number of classes that we're running over there, and with the needs that we can talk about as well coming into kindergarten, they tend to be in the classes that we have at Brookside. So while in all the other buildings we can call this agency to be there when we need them, what we were finding this year is at Brookside they were not really there when the staff was looking for them. So they were really looking for someone to help with functional behavioral assessments, behavior plans, training within the classrooms with the teachers, the certified teaching assistants on how to implement all those plans. And, the thought at the beginning was to combine it with the middle school because of some of the students that were here. But our main focus for next year will be Brookside, and the agency will continue to support all the other buildings.
Okay, great, thank you.
Rashmi?
So with more of our students, our school-age students, requiring special ed programs, are there any specific areas that you see coming up in the next few years?
Yes, so we've been focused a lot on the students with dysregulation, behavior, autism. One of the things with Dr. Seversky is we're feeling it with all of the incoming K-3s, and you can look at the charts that were part of the budget. A lot of our staffing is in that level. The behaviorists that we're talking about is in K-3. That's our focus, and moving forward, we're looking at more of those, more of a therapeutic setting in the district. We utilize the dialectical behavior therapy. We're utilizing the skills program. All of our teachers are very supportive, but we're seeing more and more students that need it continually throughout their day. So we're looking at it, we've been looking at the last couple of years in the middle school, the high school, to really start our own therapeutic support program. We're able to manage right now, but the more as you see those numbers of our preschoolers growing and the level of support that they need that was discussed in the budget report, at some point we're going to need it here, or we'll be continuing to send students out to district, to BOCES and other school districts' programs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll switch gears a little bit. Talk about technology for a minute, Jen. Wake you up over there. Can you just maybe describe what some of the steps we're taking to address cybersecurity concerns?
Sure. So we've currently updated our filters. That's one thing we've already done this year. And we've also added some threat detection to our firewall, so that's already happening. I'm part of a cohort at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES for the NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology Framework, which New York State is asking districts to review against their standards for cybersecurity. There's 10 sessions, and we're halfway through that, so there's probably 20 districts participating in that right now. So that's taking us through the framework and helping us with making procedures in our district. This is also where data privacy and cybersecurity combine. We already have our Bill of Rights in place for parents as far as data privacy goes, but we're looking at all of our vendors, our outside vendors, to ensure that they're in compliance before we allow teachers to use the software in the classroom. And so with new vendors, we have a process in place where teachers submit a software review form that goes through a series of approvals before it is approved. And I'm also planning a cybersecurity risk assessment in the fall. So currently reviewing some vendors for that to help us see what we need to do in the district. Yeah, the threat detection, yeah. So we're monitoring the network on an ongoing basis as well.
Great, thanks.
Pete?
I think what's interesting with Dr. Seversky's presentation, and you think about the people that are moving in, and you hear about our special education and PPS programs, and how many people move in specifically for that. When you go back in the last few years, there isn't a trend that there's just a lot of people within that. So I would think, the funny thing is I've heard around the county from people that don't live here about what a great special education program we have in Yorktown and how people do move here. So I would think that every year we're going to continue to see those type of things. There is no question there. No, I know. But I just found everything so, it really connected tonight for me.
Yeah, we are seeing it with all the students moving in. As Dr. Seversky was talking, I was just right on it with the numbers. And it's also just the needs of the students that are moving in. That's the key piece to what we're working on every day.
So, but I did have a question. It's a very simple one. The health services, that's going up by $18,000. What is that, Tom?
Or do you want me to? You talking about the health services that we provide?
Is that the nurses, or is that, because there's a physician?
There's a physician, and then there are the nurses, and we have 7 of them currently? So that's one aspect of it. So yes, we pay more 8 altogether, but because we provide one for St. Patrick's School. So some of that would be the increases in the compensation for the nurses. We have increased the allocation to our district medical officer, Dr. Casaro, and 2 other entities that we use for medical recommendations because we're going to them far more often, the coronavirus issue being one of those. For guidance. So we've experienced a trend over the years where we think we needed to increase the budget.
Anthony?
My turn. So I guess to answer the question around a county is we have the best special education program. I've been here a long time, and from personal experience, thank you to the administration and Lisa and Mike. I almost forgot your name after 15 years, but thank you. But it is magnificent, our special education. And like years past, moving, so we kind of built up from lower school to high school, increasing our special education in high school. So I was wondering, is it creeping even more into high school? Because I know, you know, it was lesser, now it's more. What are we doing in high school? Is there any increase in programs? Could you speak anything about that?
So in the high school, we've really been looking at a therapeutic support program. And one of the big pieces in Dr. Swirsky's report is it comes down to, you know, and I've had conversations with Dr. Hatter, and our piece is the space. So as we continue to grow and the needs of the students continue to be significant, it's the space that we need to expand.
Can I share just on space before you say? So space meaning an addition space, or space meaning another classroom? When you say space, you're talking about a program of 30 kids, 10 kids, 40 kids? I don't understand.
Typically, what we're looking at is to maybe run a program that would have a max of, say, 48 students at its peak. You know, maybe a dozen students per grade level, with 4 teachers, 1 per academic subject, a full-time clinician, certified teaching assistants. We did spend this year going out and looking at what other therapeutic programs look like, and that's really the success that they're having.
And that would be between 9 to 12? Or
It's to start there, and it's long range, and then it really needs to back to the younger grades as well.
Oh. Okay,
So just to add to that, you know, that is something that will take years to develop, what Mr. Rosen is talking about. But on a day-to-day basis, like in all of our buildings, like all of our programs, we're looking at what do our students need, whether it be on the upper end of some advanced classes, as well as what do we need for students who might have additional needs. So, for example, we just had a meeting with the high school science department regarding what they're seeing in terms of supporting special education students through the courses, through the science. And we've come up with some ways in which we can better service students going into next school year. So every day
they get extra time and extra
But we have a full spectrum of courses, whether they be integrated co-teaching, special class. We have lots of environments across every grade, across every content level at the high school that provides a setting to support each of our learners. But we continue to tweak and we continue to look, and Mr. Rosen is so good at that continued long-range thinking that'll help us as we move forward.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to technology. Jen, first I want to thank you. You've done a phenomenal job this year. When we knew Patrice was retiring last year, it was kind of scary. But you have really gone above and beyond, and we're very grateful that you're here, so thank you. Can you talk about the 2 additional people that we're looking for to put in your department for next year?
Sure. So we're looking to add a part-time edutech technician. We have 3 technicians supporting 5 school buildings as well as central administration, so it's really 6 buildings. A lot of that support and the help desk tickets that come in some of them can be handled remotely, but many of them do require them to come into the classroom or come into the office. We average around 135 new tickets every week. So with 3 people, it's a lot. And they're also doing a lot of special projects, and with the cybersecurity and helping to maintain our network, it's important to have them working on special projects as well. So we're looking to add a part-time technician to help support in the elementary schools, because we have one dedicated to 3 buildings right now. So he's really running around helping in the elementary schools. And with the Ycsd Technology Support Specialist for the K-3 buildings, as that program has grown, I've only been here a year, but I've seen all the amazing things that the younger learners are doing. So we're having someone come in and support those 2 elementary buildings to help support the Ycsd curriculum, work with teachers, whether it's on-demand training in teachers or just coordinating those special projects. So there's coordination across the 2 buildings, and then they can plan with that K-12 really scope and sequence for computer science and Ycsd projects.
Oh, terrific, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Lisa?
I'm all set, thank you.
Carol?
I'm good, thanks.
Ashwin? Mike?
I'm good.
Pete?
Good.
Anthony? Okay, I guess we're good. Thank you very much. We are very happy. All right. On, were you done? All right. We're going to go on to policy. Can I have a motion to approve the second reading and adoption of the following policies? We have 4321.12, the use of timeout rooms and physical restraints, 4600 counseling and guidance program, 4771 early graduation, 5152 admission of non-resident students, 6650 the claims auditor, and 6670 petty cash accounts.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Personnel. Upon recommendation of superintendent, a motion that the following be approved. Under certified personnel, we have an appointment, we have 2 tenure appointments, regular substitutes, other compensation, salary change. We have coaches and co-curriculars, volunteer coaches, parental leave, and educational leave, and medical leave, and a resignation. A lot of people this time. And classified personnel, we have civil service appointments, permanent appointments, and additions to the substitute list.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Business. Whereas on March 7, 2020, the governor of the state of New York has declared an emergency due to the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, and whereas in the interest of the health and safety of those in our schools and the school community, the purchase of necessary supplies and services to combat the spread of COVID-19 is required, and as the virus spread is imminent, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes or ratifies the actions of the superintendent of schools and/or his administrative designee to make purchases of goods and services necessary to maintain heightened sanitary conditions in our schools and facilities and/or to mitigate against the spread of the COVID-19 virus, thereby dispensing with bid law requirements and purchasing procedures that would otherwise be applicable under General Municipal Law 103 and 104B based upon these emergency circumstances.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Health and welfare, a motion to approve the following contracts for health and welfare services provided to resident pupils attending non-public schools in other districts for the 1920 school years. We have 3 schools below.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A motion to approve the contract with the pelagic, I can't even say it, Beast,
Pelagic.
the owner of the Klondike, for the Crampon Elementary School trips on June 3rd, 4th, and 5th, pursuant to the terms on the attached contract.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Go ahead.
So in light of the resolution we just passed about COVID-19 and this trip on June 3, 4, and 5, what is our plan
So I
as a
think-
district?
Of course. So I think our plan is going to be where it's been. This is such a fluid and evolving situation. We're looking weekly at the different trips. So, for example, last week, we postponed any large group events that we had this week. We're moving in that direction as well. So it's such a fluid situation. But if we have any chance of making it to this trip, June 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and again, it's evolving so quickly that forecasting 3 months out from now is a really difficult place to go. But if we have any chance of going, we have to approve the contract, then we can always amend it in light of the coronavirus, if that's still certainly as concerning as it is today at that point.
Okay, so approving the contract tonight does not mean the kids are going for sure. The decision will be made as we
Correct.
get closer to the event.
Correct. So for example, there's a Brookside kindergarten trip to Tarrytown Music Hall that was approved by the board several months ago when we weren't as familiar with coronavirus. That trip has been canceled.
Thanks.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A motion to approve the addendum to the contract with Silent G Production for additional props for the production of Grease on the Yorktown High School Auditorium in the amount of $1,900, term of service from March 2nd through March 16th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to approve the request for service agreement with Island Photography for the Yorktown High School commencement on June 27, 2020. There is no cost to the district.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, boy. Okay, I'm not going to read this whole thing. Whereas the Yorktown Central School District, pursuant to the authority granted in General Municipal Laws, Section 103-16, desires to participate in the Choice Partners Cooperative Purchasing Cooperative, and now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Yorktown Central School District authorizes the school district participation in the Choice Partners Purchasing Cooperative and authorizes the superintendent of schools or designee to sign the interlocal contract if necessary on behalf of the school district.
So moved.
Second.
Tom, discussion? Explain.
This is another, in order to satisfy a number of purchasing requirements for both law and policy, these purchasing cooperatives are a collective way of enabling us to bypass formal bidding and so forth. This one happens to be heavily laden with facilities options, something we've been looking significantly at recently, and we think it'll be a nice addition.
Terrific. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye opposed? A motion to approve the budget transfers listed below.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, a tax, whereas the Board of Education has previously established a tax certiorari reserve for the payment of tax refunds pursuant to the orders and judgments in tax certiorari proceedings known as a tax certiorari reserve fund, be it resolved that the Board hereby appropriates and makes transfers from the tax certiorari reserve fund to the general fund in the amount of $11,772.69 for the payment of 1920 tax refunds.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A motion to approve the following tax certiorari resolution by order of the Supreme Court of the State of New York, held in and for the County of Westchester on the 27th day of February 2020. A school tax refund in the amount of $11,772.69 is due to Verizon New York for the tax years of 2018 and 19.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Be it resolved that the following proposition be placed on the ballot at the annual district meeting of the voters of the Yorktown Central School District to be conducted on May 19, 2020. So the Board of Education of the Yorktown Central School District, Westchester County, New York, be authorized to construct improvements to the district's buildings and facilities, including but not limited to district-wide air conditioning for large learning spaces and related electrical upgrades, improvements to the physical education and athletic facilities at the high school, including additional seating at the turf field and improvements to the concession stand area, renovations to the nurses and speech offices at Mohansick Elementary Schools, renovations to the cafeteria, servery, and cafetorium at the Brookside Elementary School, including original furnishings, equipment, machinery, apparatus, and ancillary-related site and other work required in connection therewith at a maximum estimated cost of $4 million, and the amount of $4 million shall be transferred from the Buildings and Facilities Improvement Capital Reserve Fund to the Capital Fund for such purpose, provided that the cost of the components of the project may be reallocated if the Board of Education shall determine that such reallocation is in the best interest of the district.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Be it resolved that the Yorktown Board of Education approve the agreement between the school district and the County of Westchester for the use of electronic voting machines, including the other equipment and services for the May 19, 2020 annual meeting, and if necessary, budget revote to be held on June 18, 2020. Be it further resolved that the board president is authorized to execute such agreement, a copy of which is incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, budget vote resolutions. I have to read them all. No. We have the budget resolutions A through F. Below, be it further resolved that the registration of the 2020 annual school district Meeting and election be held on Monday, May 11, 2020, in the lobby of the Mildred E. Strang Middle School for the hours of 4 to 8 p.m. And everybody, can I have a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Same one we have every year. Motion to approve the cross-contract with Eastern Suffolk BOCES for bold election management services for the 2021 school year. The cost of the service is $10,024.55.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Special ed. Can I have a motion to arrange the following placements as of March 9th, 2020?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A motion to approve the following professional improvement programs for the nurses listed below.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to approve the contract with, can you please tell me the name? Dr. Sylvain Nakab for psychiatric evaluations and consultation services as per IEP mandates or through the recommendation of the Committee on Preschool Special Education or the Committee on Special Education. The contract rate will be $1,800 per evaluation without computerized testing and $2,150 with computerized testing, contract not to exceed $21,150.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Gifts, grants, and donations. A motion to accept with gratitude the following gifts, grants, and donations at Yorktown High School: $25 from the York Cause for Life Employee Match Program, $2,000 from the Yorktown PTSA for Senior Day Guest Speaker Assembly, YHS Athletics, $37.50 from the Huskers Club for the varsity girls lacrosse trip to Philadelphia, at Crampon, $2,500 from the Crampon PTA for the 5th grade Klondike trip, scholarships and grants, $750 in contribution to the George Budries Memorial Scholarship Fund from Theodore and Rhoda Georgalis.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're up to board comment. Anthony? Pete? Mike?
Nope.
Rashmi?
I'm good.
I'm good, thanks.
I'm good, thank you.
All right, I each have two reminders. One, that nominating petitions for board seats, there are two up this year, are available. They're due back at the clerk by April 20th at 5 p.m. And personal registration, as I just said, for people wanting to register to vote in the school board, budget and board elections is May 11th at 4 p.m. here at this building from 4 to 8 p.m. We are up to public comment. Anybody wish to speak? Yeah, please come to the podium. Name. Well, you got to say it into the microphone.
Hi, I'm Casey Polisi. If a student were to test positive for COVID-19, what would be the immediate action plan for the district?
And thank you for asking that. The immediate action plan is to close the school if we have a student test positive while we understand the facts. And then after the first 24 hours, that was actually guidance issued by the governor's office today, that we would close the school for 24 hours and then make a determination as to if a further closing was warranted. So that I couldn't tell you after the first 24 hours without knowing all of the circumstances around the testing.
Thank you.
Very good.
Ron, while we're on the subject, can you just reiterate to everybody on camera what proactive items you have
Sure.
done in the last 2 weeks?
Sure. We've upped our disinfection schedule of every office space, every classroom space, every communal space, restroom certainly, to a daily disinfection schedule. We have made hand sanitizer stations available throughout our schools so that students have that option. We've instituted formal hand washing breaks at the K-5 level at multiple points during the school day. We have requested that our bus contractor begin a disinfection schedule of the buses, so we've initiated that request. We have limited large group gatherings so that we can just reduce the risk of community spread within our schools. We've met with our nurses and our medical director to really make sure that they have all of the information that they need to identify some of the signs and symptoms. We've reduced our body temperature thresholds within the schools to result more quickly in sending a student home, just erring on the side of caution. There are just so many different steps that we've taken, and thank you to the board. You've invested in this wonderful technology for our facilities department where we are able to disinfect the spaces without having to go to overtime because of the efficient technologies that we have in the district. So I thank you for your support of these efforts. And we're continuing to be vigilant, obviously. We're continuing to just follow up with students. Our health office has been dynamite, absolutely dynamite in following up with students and their families to understand what their circumstances are, to if there are any concerns. So it's becoming more widespread. It's certainly passing through different communities. I can rest assured, and I think the board and our community can rest assured, that this district has done anything and everything that we possibly can to make sure that our school buildings are a healthy and safe environment for our students and staff.
I just want to thank you and your team, Lisa and Tom and all the other people, because this has been a tough 2 weeks, and it's unprecedented. You know, you're in uncharted territories, and not only have you gone above and beyond and done what you thought was right for our students, you have kept the community updated all the time. Your emails go out, everybody knows what's going on, and I thank you for that. Anything else? Are we good? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good night.